Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. It is Coach Candy here with Coffee Chats. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday, y'all. We're going to have a good discussion once again this morning. Grab that coffee, grab your tea, grab your water, grab your juice, grab milk, whatever it is that gets you rocking and rolling and get your day started. So excited to have you all here. Good morning, Paul. Welcome. Good morning, Martha. Good to see familiar faces as always. Welcome, everybody. Oh, man, it is Thursday already. This week, I'll tell you, short weeks kick my butt sometimes. This week has been like, yeah, wow, 7:30 comes fast. Yeah, and so does Thursday this week. Holy crap. Good morning, Deborah. I feel like it's Monday. I really feel like it should be Monday today. I have so much that's been going on that it just feels like there's no way it's already Thursday. It's insane to me for sure. So hopefully you guys are feeling very productive. But yeah, 7:30 comes fast, and so this week has been rolling fast. I always say short weeks are not short by any means. I feel like we pack like 3 weeks in one. So interesting. Let's see if anyone else here is going to jump on for a minute, because I'm going to start getting into some discussion around how I made the transition. A lot of you have asked and want to get into some discussion around, you know, how did I move from corporate to doing what I'm doing now, and what were the big, good morning, Shirley, what were the triggers, what were those moments, what were the things that showed up that helped me know that it was time, right? And so I will say that there was a series of things that happened over a period of time, and then there was some significant things that happened all at once. And so it's interesting, you know, when you start to drop in and you listen to your intuition, and you, thankful Thursday, yes, grateful for y'all as well, heart to hearts to everyone. And so when you think about that, there's signs all the time. We get answers to our questions. And I love that there's a passage in Conversations with God, which is one of my favorite books, that talks about, he asked the question to God, and he says, I feel like we ask you questions all the time, but you're not listening. And you don't answer us. And however he says it, it's something like, I feel like we ask you questions all the time. We ask you and you don't answer. And God says, I answer all the time, you're not listening. And he says, it's like, good morning, Sarah. It's like that favorite song that shows up and you've heard it, 12 times. And at one time you find yourself crying when you're listening to it. Or it's that time where, you've had a book sitting on your shelf for 3 years and you're like, yeah, someday. And then you wake up that morning and you're like, I don't know why, but I got to read that book today. Those are all signs and messages that show up for us in our life. And I remember for me, there was a series, and I've had what I call defining moments. There are these defining moments in my life, and I've had them as early as I can remember from being a kid, things that have changed my life. And I know I shared one of those stories when I was about 8 or 9 that actually started to put me on a path to really understand what my purpose was, to really understand who I was. And then, of course, I fought with it all through my teens and 20s because there was just this space that I wasn't ready for it. Yet we get, good morning, Alyssa. Good morning, Herbie. Wow, I love everybody jumping on here. Morning, morning. So I want you to think about that. First of all, there are messages and there are signs all the time. Sometimes we're not awake enough to see what's dropping in, and sometimes we're not ready for what's dropping in. And so there could be series of things that are showing up. So for some of you that have been sitting on kind of that line, I want to share a little bit of my story this week. Good morning, Tanisha. I want to share a little bit about how I made the transition from corporate to being an entrepreneur, to being a business owner, to doing the work that I do now, because it didn't just happen overnight, and then again it just happened overnight. And so it was really powerful, because I think when you step into a place to give yourself permission, when you step into a place to really recognize the signs and the messages and the things that are happening in your life and see the patterns and the incongruencies as well as the congruencies, you'll start to see that you're getting the answer for what you need when you're ready and when you choose to be awake to what's happening around you. And so a couple of the stories I'm going to tell you, I have to say, are not my finest moments. Two of them in particular that were the turning point was when I was in the throes of my corporate career. I was a fast tracker. I was climbing at a crazy awesome rate. I had a lot of visibility, and on the outside looking in, by anyone else's metric, I would have been someone that people would have said, you want to aspire to be Candy. She is kicking ass. She's taking names. Look at her. She is like, everything I touched seemed like it was going really well. The problem was behind the scenes, I was a hot mess, and I mean hot mess. The things I was doing to cope with the levels of stress and anxiety and what was going on. And so I know I've shared with some of you pieces of these stories. And so I want to kind of weave them together and show you sort of the progression that happened. And so this started about 11 years ago. What am I, 46? Yeah, it was about when I was 35 years old. Probably a little bit sooner than that. And at the time I was working for GE, so a big Fortune 100 company. And I was a commercial, I was a channel development manager, and basically I was the pricing Nazi, so to speak. I was a risk manager for our business. And when I first started working in my role, I actually had one team. I had 40 reps. I had 5 managers. Well, my counterpart ended up leaving at one point, so I ended up taking on his entire region as well. So I had the entire country, which was 2 full jobs at one point on my plate. And then when our financial manager left, I had some of his job that fell on my plate as well. In addition, not only was I running an entire channel, the acute channel at that time, I also was running the entire subacute. So at one point when I was in this role, I had 120 reps that I was managing their deals, and 13 regional managers that I was needing to deal with on a daily basis. And for anyone that knows anything about the role that I was in, that's like almost impossible to keep up with, because every deal that's done in the healthcare business often has to be pushed through what's known as a GPO. So it's a group purchasing organization. And so there's rules that you play by. And most of our deals always needed additional discount, always needed additional finesse, always needed additional things before they could close. And my role was to evaluate the risk on the business for any of those additional discounts. It could be even concessioning training. It could be little things. And what's interesting, good morning, Candace. Oftentimes our reps had no clue the level of risk that was associated with the kinds of deals that we put together. Because what most people didn't realize was the government also audited us. They would pick one of those GPOs and they would look at the GPO and say, this is the one we're gonna measure by. And if we would give more discount to that GPO than we gave to the government, they would come back and retroactively make us fill the gap, which was millions and millions and millions of dollars at the end of the day, even if it was only like a percent or 2 in that space. So a lot of risk. I even remember signing those papers that said, I know that what I'm doing is in good faith, that I am, you know, it's that whole integrity in the numbers game, right? You're not getting creative in that, because there literally was a space that was like, I am responsible. I could go in an orange jumpsuit kind of thing, right? At the end of the quarter, if there was auditing. I can remember auditors sitting in my office for 6 months because of a deal I inherited coming into the job that was all kinds of convoluted mess, right? So high stress job. So I just say that to say extremely high stress job. Was it a sign everybody else was leaving? Yes, and we'll get to that. So Tanisha, very good, right? There's the first sign that's there on all deals, yes. And so the thing is the way the business is structured, that every single deal that gets done and the amount and quantity of deals that happen on any kind of basis, especially when you're looking at both the service organization and the frontline sales organization, is a lot. The other thing you need to know is 11 years ago, the software, the technology that was available, it took 24 hours for the data to actually crunch through the system for me to get what I needed to actually do the analysis and assessment, which meant people would send me things at, 6 o'clock, wanting something the next day, and pretty much means I didn't go to bed. I didn't sleep. So I was legitimately at that time, yes, right? Huge sign. And so, and we have stories we tell ourselves, because I will say, back in the day, I can remember when I first started working at GE, there's several Fortune 100 companies that are in that space. When you work for them, there's this crazy pride that you get that says, man, I'm playing at that level. And they create this culture and this environment that you're like, holy crap, I got selected to be here. And so there's this whole buy-in of, if I don't bring my A game, they got somebody ready to backfill me in a heartbeat. And that's what they teach, right? It's this whole kind of rack and stack mentality, wind and grind, burn and churn. And if you're not willing to give your 3,000%, they got somebody right behind you chomping on your heels that's ready to take your position. And so there's this mindset or this story that's fed to you that we believe into, we buy into, we get told this growing up, right? You need the job, you need to work for corporate, you need to be climbing the corporate ladder, you need to be doing these things. And I sit back now and I'm like, this is just absolute craziness that we are teaching this, that we're putting this out there. Good morning, Ruben. And so what's interesting is I was at that time, and this is no joke, and there's times that we tell stories that like we like to exaggerate. I am legitimately telling you, I worked 80 to 100 hours a week every week. I would not come home. Now I worked from home sometimes too, and I get up at 6 in the morning and I wouldn't be done till 11:30 at night. I would finally eat dinner because I'd realize, holy crap, I didn't eat all day. I would like fall into bed exhausted. If I got 3 or 4 hours of actual sleep, I was lucky. Talk about my adrenals being out of whack. I mean, I was like so out of like a body experience, but I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. I was traveling oftentimes because I was the bad cop who got to go. I did love that part where my reps couldn't close deals, and I'd be like, I'm so tired of sitting on this deal. I'd fly down to Dallas or do something and walk into a hospital, and I would lay the terms down, and I'm like, look, here's the best we're gonna do. Take it, leave it, or I'm pulling my team out of here. And every time we closed a deal, it was awesome. But I was like the good morning, Mateo. Yes, they do sell a good story, and it's aura and mystique about most of those places. Corporate does that in general, right? And so it's interesting because you know, I'm sitting there and, you know, I go in and I am the unassuming bad cop, which always made it even more powerful because people look at me and they don't expect me to be the one to drop the hammer. So I did love that about my job. There was something really cool. I was the queen of negotiating. I could go in and drop the hammer and close like things that would be sitting on the books for 6 months, year and a half, whatever. That being said, I can remember my boss texting me at 2 in the morning once because he needed something for 8 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God. And I answered the text. And he said, well, I knew you'd be up because you were staying with one of my other colleagues. He's like, I knew you two would still be up working. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm responding to text messages at 2 in the morning. I would work till 11 o'clock on a Friday. Saturday was my one day. And a lot of times when I traveled, I would literally I would leave Sunday night or first thing like before the sun came up on Monday morning. Sometimes I'd be in 3 different time zones. I wouldn't get back till late Friday night. Saturday was my day to like run around because I would actually get phone calls from my dry cleaners that said if I didn't come pick up my clothes, they were going to donate them because I couldn't get to the dry cleaners before it closed ever. The bank, same thing. That was back before you could deposit checks on your phone and other things. It was amazing why banking hours are like 9 to 2. I owe 9 to 4. No professional that's working a job can ever get to the bank from 9 to 4. I'm just going to say I'm glad that they've changed their hours and that they've given us more flexibility. Because for me, banking, my dry cleaners, any of that stuff was not something I could get to. And so then Sunday I would be back on by 11:30 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon, and it would be straight to 11 o'clock at night again. And for me, I would have the phone going, I would have the other phone going, I'd have my computer, and I'd have Messenger going. So there was usually 4 or 5 different things going on at once. I can remember I'd get up to go to the bathroom and I'd come back and there'd be like 250 emails just from going to the bathroom. It was craziness, right? Eating during the day was not something. And so all of these things were things that I was sacrificing when I was in that role, right? Namaste, everyone. And so what happened was I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. And I still don't remember which of these defining moments happened first, because I got to tell you, I was pretty much in a fog at that point. I was doing what I needed to function in my job, and I was doing every kind of coping activity to take the edge off. And so I'll get into that. Candy is describing the Hollywood version of how we were programmed in our 20s, normal actions to be successful. Yeah, right? No pain, no gain. If you're not crushing it, you're not winning it. If you're not, I mean, think about it, especially the Gen Xers, what we were taught in that space, right? You got to suck it up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You know what? Suck it up, buttercup. I mean, I think about all those cliches that we were taught. And so what happened was, one of the first defining moments was I started to get a debilitating pain in my chest. So much so that it doubled me over. Like I couldn't breathe. And so I started getting this pain where every time I tried to breathe, I was just like, I would almost pass out. I was like, I can't breathe through this pain. And I remember the very first thing I said when I mentioned it to one of my colleagues, like, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, I don't have time to go to the hospital. I got 3 deals I got to push out. I'll go to the hospital when things roll down. It's fine. I must have ate something wrong. I made excuses for weeks about why this pain was knocking me over. I mean, this is crazy. Here I am, my body is like screaming at me. I have this pain where literally I'm walking around hunched over like this, and I'm taking breaths like this, and when I took deep breaths, it hurt so bad. So I would just do really shallow breaths, which is part of what caused this problem in the first place. So finally, when it legitimately just had me doubled over, I couldn't even stand upright. I still didn't go to the emergency room. I decided that I was going to drive myself in because, you know, I made an appointment with my doctor, and I remember sitting in the waiting room. And I remember having this like rock bottom epiphany moment. First of all, before I went in, just so y'all know, let's just be clear. I did what any smart, intelligent, educated, degreed person would do. I went out on the web, and I went on WebMD.com, and I went and self-diagnosed. Let me tell you, that is never the answer when you've already got pain in your body, because I don't care if it says you put in broken fingernail. If you scroll down far enough, you are dying of cancer, heart attack, or something. You're dying. So of course I see the word heart attack, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack. Let me tell you what that does when you keep telling yourself you're having a heart attack, when you already can't breathe and there's this mass in your chest that has you doubled over. That is why I had to go to the hospital, because I was hyperventilating, and I couldn't breathe, and I had this pain in my chest that had me doubled over, that I literally was like, okay, I'm going to pass out. So, of course, drove myself to the doctor's, called him, got an appointment, sat in the waiting room, and the world came crashing down. Because I remember, and this is one of those beautiful moments where now I look at it as such a gift, when in that moment it was the scariest moment of my life, because I remember sitting there and asking myself, I'm like, you know, the doctor's going to ask you why you think you're having a heart attack. Like, what has caused this? What's going on in your life? And I remember the immediate question that flashed in my head. And I talk to myself in third person when I'm scolding myself or when I'm reprimanding myself. So I was like, Candy Barone, when was the last time you got a good night's sleep? And I remember sitting there, and I remember staring at the eye chart on the wall. And I just kept staring at it and staring at it and staring at it. I'm like, well, it wasn't. I said, well, do I mean when, you know, like not just working so hard that I passed out on my laptop because I just hit the, I mean, I would wake up with like key prints on my forehead because I would just pass out. Not when I went out and had like 5 or was it 6 martinis the other night to take the edge off so that I passed out when I came home because I couldn't deal with it anymore. Not because, and I just kept going through this litany of things. And I remember sitting there going, I can't remember in the last 3 weeks when I actually got a good night's sleep. And I was like, oh shit, right? You just kind of sit there. And then it was like, the training wheels came off and like everything fell away. And then I was like, oh my God, he's going to ask me about all of the other things going on in my life, right? And so, WebMD, flu symptoms, like you lost a limb. Yes, I swear. You have an allergy. You were abducted by aliens. You ate graham crackers. Yeah, WebMD is the worst site possible. I'm just saying. So I'm sitting there, and after I realized, I was like, Candy Barone, when's the last time you slept? And I'm like, not in the last 3 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to ask me, or I'm going to have to tell him about the fact that, wait, I emotionally binge eat. I think last week I put down a large pizza, and then I ate this, and then I did that, and oh my God, and then I was really mad at myself, and oh, I went to the gym and worked out 3 hours a night, and I didn't stop for 3 weeks, and they wouldn't even let me check in. Was that last week? They wouldn't even let me check in. And by the way, this is how fast my thoughts were going. I'm like, they wouldn't even let me check in because they're like, Candy, you're going to hurt yourself. You've been here 3 nights every week. We've watched you train. You're killing yourself. Or does he want to know the fact that I yo-yoed from a size 6 to a size 18 in 6 months, and I did that several times because I was binge eating, and then I would get mad at myself and I would go to the gym, and then when I wouldn't pull it fast enough, I would start taking fat burners, and when that fat burner didn't work, I started taking another one, and then I started doubling up. Or is it the fact that I went out with the guys, what night was that? We put down like, was it 5, 6 martinis and how many shots, and oh my God, and oh, is it the bag of clothes I have in the hallway that I went to Ann Taylor, and didn't I drop like $500? I don't even know what the hell I spent. Or maybe it's and literally just boom, 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 boom. To where like I seriously am surprised I wasn't like passed out cold in the doctor's waiting room, because I was in such a state of anxiety at that point. I was in such a state of fear that I literally was like, oh my God, I cannot tell my doctor that I've been doing this. I did not want to own or take responsibility for any of it. And you want to talk about being wide open and vulnerable when you have to sit in a space. And so I remember, and again, this was like a fog moment, because I went into his office. I remember us having a conversation, and I think I just purged. I just let all of that come out. We ran a battery of tests over a couple days. I had an endoscopy, colonoscopy. I had MRIs. I had CAT scans. I had all these things going on. And when we arrived at the answer, it turned out that I had a mass that I had manifested in my chest because of what I call up above the neck breathing or shallow breathing, because I had so much stress and anxiety that I was in a position where I was holding my breath or doing that. And I was basically creating anxiety attacks for myself. That this mass that manifested, it physiologically manifested just because of the stress I was holding in my body, tripped a sliding hiatal hernia I didn't even know I had. I remember calling my mom and telling her, she's like, well, that runs in our family. And I'm like, oh, it'd been nice if I actually would have told people what's going on. And by the way, this was back in the day where I truly felt like sharing any weakness, sharing any of my vulnerability, sharing any of my story, especially trauma and abuse from when I grew up, especially things going on at work, made me weak and made me a victim. So I was very clear that I didn't talk about anything with anyone, which I realized later on made me more of a victim than if I would have actually talked about it. There is talking about it to get help, and there's talking about it where you're not taking responsibility. And so I remember some of my friends when it finally came out, and even this didn't fully come out until CNN did an article on me when I first stepped away from corporate, and talk about, wow, wide open. I mean, the first line in that article in CNN says Candy Brown has very little recollection of her late 20s. And I was like, oh crap, we went there. And I remember having conversation with family members and some of my dearest friends who said we knew something was going on, we didn't know how to intervene. And I think about what we do to ourselves in that space. And so that was a huge rock bottom moment for me. You've just described my 23. Yeah, that was my entire 20s and part of my 30s. And what was interesting is I sat in the doctor's office and he came out, he goes, good news, you're not having a heart attack. I was like, yes. He goes, sit down. And we had a long talk. And I remember walking out of that office going, something in my life needs to change, because I'm 35 years old. And if I don't knock this off, I'm going to be in the grave by the time I'm 40. So I started to reevaluate my life. At that point, I left GE the first time and I went to go work for a nonprofit. And it turned out the nonprofit wasn't what it was cracked up to be. And I thought that I really needed to step into a space. And so I remember waking up at 2 a.m. when I was so heartbroken that all they wanted was my resume and my network and the fact that I had connections into these Fortune 100 companies, when I was like, something about that woke me up. And I remember the YES philosophy, the You Empowered Strong philosophy, came to me about 10 years ago at 2 a.m, 11 years ago, I guess now. I woke up and I was like, yes, yes means something. Yes, saying yes to yourself, right? And at the time it was Youth Empowered Strong, because the nonprofit I went to work with was really helping inner city kids, junior high, high school, and college age students learn that there's opportunities in technology and science. I was working for Discovery World in Milwaukee. And then went back to GE because it wasn't what I thought, and GE was comfortable. Even as much as it was killing me, it was comfortable and it was safe. And then I had a second rock bottom while I was at GE. And again, even though, and it might have been the other way around, I don't remember. Again, it might have been the first one, because I think, because when I came back, I actually started to reclaim some of my life. I was very clear that I wasn't going to work as many hours. I wasn't going to take this on. But somewhere inside of that space, I had another moment where I had gone to a friend's party. And this is one for sure that is not a highlight of my life by any means, but one of the best gifts, I guess you could say, I've been given for the wake-up call. I had gone to a friend's party. I had a couple drinks, and I was like, you know what? I'm way too tired to be drinking tonight. I was like beyond exhausted. And when I talk about burnout to people, I talk about 3 levels of burnout. Thank you, Candace. Sit down for me, right? I talk about the 3 levels of burnout. One of them being burnout. Burnout's that space where you start to disengage, where you're feeling exhausted, where you truly, your health is suffering, your sleep starting to be disrupted, your adrenals are probably getting out of whack. And then there's the space past burnout, and almost every human being that's in corporate in some capacity is probably, or in business in general, in the US in particular, has experienced some level of burnout. It's our culture, right? We've created this space of that being a like notch on the headboard or something kind of space, the whole pride thing, the thing we like get to say, hey, look at me, I'm so stressed, I'm awesome. We've created this culture of who can outsuck who. And so most people know some level of burnout because we take on too much. We try to multitask. We do all these things that are distracting us. People are burnt out because they're constantly plugged into their phone and technology. there's also this next level that is the fumes past burnout. And this is when it's legitimately getting difficult to get out of bed in the morning. This is when your personality starts to shift and you start snapping, or you start doing all kinds of addictive behaviors to take the edge off, whether it's emotional binge eating, whether it's hardcore drugs, whether it's smoking, whether it's shopping, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex with partners that you're not in love with, whether it's exercise, whether it's perfectionism, whether it's working too much, whatever it is, you start creating addictive behaviors to stop paying attention to aspects of your life that you don't want to deal with. And so you're in this like comatose kind of like fog state where you're just doing everything to function through the day. And then there's the space past the fumes, which is where I was at, which was like the black abyss. It's the space where you go so deep, you don't know how to get out. You are so in a cycle of something that you can't even recognize. You don't know who you are. You feel like you are completely isolated. This is where people fall off the grid at times, and where they become hopeless and depression and those things show up. For me, I got really angry. I wanted nothing to do with like anybody. I wanted to fight everything. I wanted to shut everybody out. And then I did even more addictive type behaviors to take the edge off and cope. And what had happened was I was at this party, and I was just like, I need to take a nap. I'm like, I can't go home. I don't want to drink. I'm so exhausted. And I'd had a drink or two. I did not drink much, but I had a drink or two. And I went to sleep. I took a nap on the couch and got up at 5 in the morning. So I'm like, I got to get back at it. I got work to do. It was like, Friday night, and it was a Saturday. And I remember getting in my car, and it was like literally 15 minutes from my house. I think I was in West Dallas, and I lived in Shorewood at the time. And I was driving, and I remember this, pieces of this. I was driving and the sun was coming up, and I remember hearing the wheels under my car. I didn't have the radio on. I just remember hearing like I could just hear the wheels turning on the pavement. And for some reason, because I was exhausted, let's not say for some reason, because I was exhausted, I fell asleep at the wheel just long enough to swerve right and take out a guardrail. Which, shook me. I knew that I hit the guardrail, and I just kept driving and drove home. I parked my car, and I literally crawled up the steps in my duplex and passed out to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was so exhausted that I just rock bottom. I remember, and this is going to get me a little emotional because it's still one of those moments that I can't believe that how fortunate I was and how irresponsible I was. And I remember going out when I woke up at 3, and my car was on the street. And I remember going out and seeing my car. I had probably a 5-foot piece of guardrail sticking out of the right front end of my car, sticking straight out. Like, ended up being $2,500 of damage to my right side of my car. And I remember having a moment where my fear and anxiety went through the roof. My shame was absolutely unbelievable, because the first thought that went through my head was, I could have killed someone. And that was so not okay for me. I'm very grateful that for whatever reason I went right. I am very grateful that for whatever reason that was the wake-up call I needed. And I remember every time, and I'm so not kidding you, because my shame was so deep, every time I heard a siren, every time I heard any kind of commotion, I seriously thought the cops were going to come arrest me, because technically I had a hit and run with a guardrail. I went through that shame for months. I actually had to talk to somebody to help me release some of it. And it was the biggest wake-up call for me. That was, what am I doing to my life? Not only am I in the hospital thinking I'm having a heart attack, I could have killed someone, because my level of exhaustion is so far off the charts that I'm no longer being responsible. And by the way, if you don't think sleep deprivation is as bad as alcoholism or being drunk, you are sadly mistaken. There are far more accidents that happen because people fall asleep at the wheel because they are exhausted and they are burnt out than happen because of drunk driving. I just want you to know that. It is absolutely something that we need to be mindful of. And it started to make me realize that it was time to leave. And so I became very clear that me staying in the current environment I was in was killing me. And it was a hard decision, because I loved my loved my boss. I loved my team. I loved what I got to do. And I just was clear that I couldn't keep going at this pace because I was slowly killing myself and potentially killing other people around me. And so I made the decision that I was going to leave. And that was the first piece of my transition that led me then to Northwestern Mutual, which was a whole different experience when I got there, because it was like going from 180-degree different culture. This was a culture that was all about family. People left at 4:30, 5 o'clock at night, didn't understand that. And I'm going to talk more about what happened once I got to Northwestern Mutual and signs that showed up there. But right now I want to show you that there are moments in our life that happen for us. Our life happens for us all the time. And I look at those moments now as such gifts and blessings that I was given. There was absolutely, and I remember Wayne Dyer saying something like, you're never done. Well, as long as you're still on this earth, you have work to do. And I think about opportunities where I got, quote, lucky, or I was blessed to not have something else happen in my life. And I realized because all of that was what I needed to be able to step in and connect with people and do this work. One of the reasons I go back and do leadership training in corporate, and I talk about self-care and I talk about mindset, and I do that with many of you who are sitting on that line of teetering, is because I know what happens when you hand your personal power over. I know what happens when you're willing to sell your soul for something that's not even meaningful. I know what happens when you disengage from your own life and you get caught up in the, good morning, Melinda, you get caught up in the, good morning, Donna, you get caught up in the cycle of what's expected. You get caught up in society shooting all over you. And when you don't start to see the signs, when you don't start to listen to your body, to what's going on around you, to your intuition, I know the cost probably better than most people. And those experiences were given to me so that I can help other people recognize when they're sliding down that slippery slope into the black abyss. And my job now is to help people before they get into the fumes, before they get into the black abyss, so that they have an opportunity to reclaim their life and have an opportunity to do that. And it became very clear when I left and worked for the nonprofit. There were things that came up, and it's interesting because if you ever read my book in the beginning when it has Yes Philosophy, those are the exact things I wrote at 2 o'clock that morning that spoke to me about, why did this speak to me so much? Why did I leave to do this? What's calling to me? And I started writing that down. And when I share my story about my time at Northwestern Mutual, one of the signs was when I was purging through some of my papers, one of the last things that was on the pile was that paper that I wrote at 2 in the morning that had the whole Yes Philosophy, that started to settle in and make me realize that this wasn't a project. This wasn't a thing I was going to build while I was climbing the corporate ladder. This was something that was deep inside of me, and this was who I am. And so I share that because I hope that some of my story sheds some light on where there's opportunities. You can all see Peyton in the back. Look at that cute face. Taking a little nap on his chair. So I want you to think about, where are those signs showing up? Don't wait until you have the debilitating pain in your chest. Don't wait until you crash your car because you fall asleep at the wheel. You are worth far more than extending yourself past any kind of level of reason because someone else says that you should. If you are feeling like you are lost, if you are feeling like you are drowning, if you are feeling like you are stuck, if you are feeling like you are overwhelmed and burnt out 90% of the time, that in itself is a sign. If you have been called to show up on these calls every morning and engage in this conversation, that's a sign for you. And so listen to the signs that are showing up before you get to a space where it could be extremely costly. And it cost me in many capacities more than just the $2,500 that I needed to fix my car. It cost me a lot of sitting in my own integrity and getting really clear about who I wanted to be and what was not okay for me. And what I needed to change in my life. It was a call to take responsibility in a much bigger way. Mateo, do not fear the decisions you have already made. Many of us think we have not made the decision and believe the door isn't open, and fearing going through the door of choice that they've already made. Step into, you are not teetering, you have decided. Now take responsibility, trust your abilities to recover from failure, and act, just act, yeah. And the thing is, you can change your decision any day. If you made a choice and you're like, but I made a choice, I'm stuck. No, you're not. Make a new decision today. You get to say that decision didn't work for me. So today I changed the narrative. Today I changed my decision, and today I'm stepping up and taking more responsibility. Thank you, Mateo. I appreciate that. And I want you to realize, and all of you inspire me. You inspire me to be able to share these stories. It's taken me a long time to be able to talk about these stories because, like I said, I used to have a mindset that said, I can't share this. It makes me a victim if I tell people about my problems. There's a difference between sharing your stories and taking responsibilities for others to relate to versus sharing your stories so that other people enable and allow you to have pity and stay victimized in that space. And so I want you to recognize your voice is powerful. The things that you've experienced, the things that you've gone through, the traumas, the abuse, the ups, the downs, the rock bottoms, the defining moments, those have all been gifted to you as a way for you to stand in your purpose. I said a million times, you know, God gave me my childhood so that someday I would stand in my purpose. Everything that happened to me, and that's the article, if you ever want to go see the article on CNN, it says overcoming, it says how's it titled? Overcoming a legacy of abuse, something like how I destroyed the noise by overcoming a legacy of abuse. There's an article, just type in CNN Candy Brown, you'll find it. But what's amazing is it sat on the front page of a health section for over a week. I was the prominent article, and it went through channels across the US, talking about being vulnerable. And I remember getting a call from someone in South Carolina who said, I think I need to talk to you. I think my partner's going through the same thing. And I recognized that that was a story that could help others heal. Then there's a responsibility in when and how you share it. And I say that because many of you have, good morning, Heather, many of you have those same stories or have your own stories that are an opportunity in the right areas for the right people who have earned your trust, who have the opportunity for you to be vulnerable, for you to share your stories so that not only you heal, but you help them create healing as well. And so as you're thinking about what are the triggers, what are the opportunities, where and how do you know when to transition, first and foremost, I want you to listen to the signs. I want you to recognize the signs. I want you to tune into those defining moments. And I want you to really give yourself permission to listen and see, pay attention to the patterns and the threads that are running through your life, because you already know what you're right next. Hello, Angie. Thanks for sharing. Guess what? I will be later today watching your favorite team. Awesome. I love that. Oh, yeah, I'll be watching later today too. So go Cubs. I know you're probably go Brewers, but that's all right. And so I just want you to think about that. I want you to think about that's your ownership for you, right? That's your opportunity to lean in. And it might require you doing some meditating, might require you doing some journaling, might require you getting into and telling yourself your story first. But your stories are powerful, and your stories are part of what's being called to you for your next level and your next transition. So thank you all so much for holding space for me to share those stories today. Still difficult sometimes. There's ownership in that, right? And so hopefully one or both of those stories help you a little bit. Good morning, Robin. To take more ownership of your own life as well, to listen and be able to tell your own story. And we're going to continue. I'm going to talk about what happened once I left GE and my time at Northwestern Mutual and how that helped me walk into what I'm doing now. So I love you all so much. Thank you again for holding such a wonderful, safe container for me and for each other. Sending you all heart-to-heart hugs, and I will catch you all tomorrow, 7:30. Thanks, everyone.